All right, y'all, what's going on? Welcome to another awareness-based training video. Today we're talking about foot pain and the anatomy of shoes and why modern shoes are not foot-shaped and why modern feet are shoe-shaped. So real quick, just if you want to be able to book a pain-free how-to 15-minute call to gain clarity on what's going on with your injury, you can scan this QR code on the right-hand side here. In addition to that, if you want to join the Facebook group, if you're not viewing this from there, you can join my Facebook group where I post a lot more in-depth pieces and questionnaires and try and provide as much feedback on how to move pain-free and train for longevity while still maintaining and gaining better performance by scanning this QR code on the left. So we're talking about the anatomy of shoes, what happens to our feet, what happens to our knees, all the stuff up the chain, why that's a problem, and how we can fix it. So the anatomy of a shoe. On a modern shoe, this is what we got. So we have obviously the heel tab, the upper portion, the toe box, which is usually more narrow, the threads on the bottom of a shoe. We have the midsole, the arch here, which we're going to talk about why you don't want that, and then the outer sole heel, which is also a heel elevation, which is not a zero drop, and why that's important. But just kind of like the basic anatomy of a shoe. This would be the tongue of the shoe, right? Obviously stuff like that. But this portion in the front here that goes up is also called a toe spring in a shoe. And then again, this front is the toe box here, which we'll talk more about that later. So did running shoes always look like they do now? The answer is no. This is an original Nike running shoe from the 1970s, 1980s. And you can see it's got almost no toe spring in the front. Let me change my color here. It's got a little bit of a heel lift, but maybe not as much as the modern shoes do. Have you ever seen the Hokas? Those things are wild. And then obviously there's a solid heel attachment. All that stuff is fine. There doesn't look to be too much of an arch support, even though there is a heel lift. So running shoes have changed quite a bit. And some of the things that have happened is they've introduced things like the toe spring when the shoe comes up like this to help you with when you push off in your walker and you run. And then they've added this heel cushion here over time to make sure that you're absorbing shock as it transfers up the leg when you run as well. But in reality, that actually just makes you strike the ground harder so your foot can get better feedback. And that's going to be one of the main things where if the shoe is trying to do the work that the foot can naturally do, it's going to make your foot significantly worse and more likely to develop problems down the line. So let's look at what an ancient running sandal would look like. My God, these are gorgeous. Jesus sandals. So you can see that it's extremely flat on the bottom. There is no arch support. We have a heel attachment even on this regular shoe or if it was on a regular barefoot shoe, right? There's always going to be a solid heel attachment and a very wide toe box. As you can see, these toes are able to splay naturally. So they don't have to change how they're moving. They can move as naturally as possible. And that's going to be super important. There's not a toe spring. There's not an arch support. There is a wide toe box. There is a solid heel attachment. That's for my thong flip-flop friends out there and my bros and ladies that wear Birkenstocks. Shit's not good for you. But as we continue on, we're going to talk about why the shoe is a coffin for your foot. So this is more of a modern running shoe right here. So you can see what I mean with the toe spring. There's still an arch support, the heel lift, the thicker cushioned heel here. These shoes are also normally really stiff. They don't fold very well. So the shoe is flexible up to about here, and then it becomes really stiff to, again, try and help you with that toe off. But this is going to cause a major problem and lead to things like we're going to talk about next, which are common problems from unnatural footwear. So breaking down the inside of a shoe, we can see here on a narrow toe box shoe, the toes are being crushed. Fun fact, a bunion, talking about this right here, is just a dislocation of your big toe. Same thing if you have a bunion on the pinky toe side. It is a dislocation of your big toe. It is nonsense to say that it is genetic. It's more hereditary in the sense of you wear the same shoes that your parents wear, or at least the same restrictive type of shoes that your parents wear. And on the same foot, which might not be as healthy, but that is in a wider toe box, you can still see there is still a little bit of a bunion, but it's significantly less of a dramatic line in compared to this where we have this straight line up from here. That's a pretty big angle. And then a straight line up from here, not nearly as much of an angle going inward there. And the toes have a little bit more space, and so the foot can potentially act a little bit more functional. So let's kind of run through these a little bit. plantar fasciitis. Going back to the shoe on the previous page, if I have a toe spring and a heel lift and an arch support, or two of those three, I'm essentially putting pressure on the bottom of an arch, which is when it's at its weakest, its strongest when pressure is applied down from the top. I'm then lengthening the front of my toes, lengthening my heel up, stretching the plantar fascia, creating a poor position where my feet will just get weaker and weaker. It'll make my arch weaker. It'll stretch out my plantar fascia. And that's why some of you might experience so much pain in the morning, because your foot gets to curl as it sleeps. And then when you stretch it, when you open back up and step down on the ground, you're just stretching tissue that was already lengthened too much, retightened overnight, and just going through that cycle repeatedly. Bunions, we talked about that. It's just a narrow toe box that is shoving your toes together, not letting your foot function naturally. And that means when I walk, I'm pivoting off of here rather than being able to push off the big toe at the end. When we talk about things like Morton's neuroma, that's like a compression of the nerves here. And again, it's a restrictive toe box. When I have people put in toe spacers and hop on a balance beam, this normally goes away. It's not a problem. When we get things like Achilles tendonitis, shin splints, runner's knee, which is on the side of the knee, and jumper's knee, which is below the kneecap, if my foot cannot function naturally, then I will develop problems up the chain. My foot is what propels me through my environment as far as, yes, my glute, my quad, my hamstring, they're all doing work, but my foot is the thing that actually makes contact with the ground and propels me to the area that I'm trying to go to. So if the foot can't function correctly, then there's going to be compensations up the chain. That paired with we sit a lot and we stand a lot in these shoes, and if I'm standing a lot, then I'm going to be arching my back because this shoe is pushing my weight forward to the front of my foot, causing my pelvis to tilt forward and arch my back. So you can see now all of a sudden, now the hip can't function properly. There's more load at the knee. So then we add on more heel cushion, which makes us strike the ground even harder. And it ends up being a really crappy cycle. But this can be reversed if we free the feet. So what does modern shoes actually look like? And we're looking a little bit of the difference here. So this tapered toe box, which just means it's a narrow toe box, versus a wider toe box, which is going to be, this shoe on the right is a Vivo Barefoot. It's got a really flexible sole. Again, rigid. There is zero toe spring, zero heel elevation versus a heel elevation with a toe spring. You guys can see what I mean a little bit there. There's no arch support. The shoe is solidly attached to the foot. In that case, both of them have that. But as long as we don't do too much too soon in this shoe, all this does is protect us from our environment. And it lets us navigate it safely without getting any cuts or punctures. And that's should be the point of a shoe. Let the foot naturally function, but just protect it from cuts and punctures. And so this is going to be something that's really, really important. So that way you have a natural shoe rather than a coffin for your foot. So kind of how can we make this transition without doing too much too soon? I'm sure you've heard stories where someone you know transferred to a Vibram 5 finger shoe or the the individual toes, and they started getting stress fractures and stuff. Well, you can't go from something that's super cushioned to no cushioning at all in a day. It takes time. So normally when I work with people on this, I have them start by just wearing toe spacers. We walk around barefoot in the gym when we train. We don't do any dynamic movements initially. And I suggest that they get a pair of barefoot shoes, and then over time I say, wear them around, but have your other normal shoes that you have with you. And when you get tired or fatigued, switch back to your regular shoes. So we have things like avoiding transitioning too quick, and then we have foot mobility and foot restoration tools. Here's 2 examples of foot restoration tools. You can get these from the Foot Collective. They're a great group. And so these are what I mean by toe spacers, and the lacrosse ball is something that we use to roll out to help mobilize the foot. I apply pressure. It desensitizes the bottom of my foot as I apply this new pressure. And then in addition to that, I also get to splay the foot better, meaning spread the toes rather than having them restricted. So here are some foot exercises. Pardon my lovely dirty feet, but dirty feet are healthy feet, y'all. So this is a toe disassociation exercise. So you're going to see me trying to lift just the big toe separate from the little toes, and the little toes separate from the big toes. So without my ankle moving, without my hip moving, I'm going to go through, and I can use my hands for assistance. Let's see if I do it here. But I'm going to be able to lift my big toes without my little toes. So I'm demoing a hand assistance here. So again, I'm going to go through. I'm lifting just the big toe, ideally without the ankle moving any type of laterally. And then I'm going to lift just the little toes. Again, I'm holding them down. I'm holding down the big toe. If I need to, over time, my ability to disassociate the two toes will improve. So again, I'm moving there. I don't want to roll the ankle. And then I'm moving the smaller toes. I don't want to roll the ankle. And no, my feet did not always look like this. I used to have really close, narrow toes at the end, really bad bunions on both sides. You can see I'm still healing this bunion over here, but it's gotten dramatically better. My pinky toe used to almost be like underneath my ring toe. That shit ain't natural. So, next one, short foot. This is learning how to lift and create an arch by pulling the ball of the big toe straight backwards without any assistance from the ankle lifting off the ground. So I'm taking this and I'm pulling it straight backwards. The big point would be I'm not curling my toes. Sandal folk, you will do that. You will curl the toes because when I don't have a heel attachment, I have to curl to walk forward. So in resisting that, I'm able to create a solid arch position without having to curl the feet. If you got hammer toes, like when your toes are at rest, they're all curled up, this is the exercise for you, along with pulling and lengthening and self-massaging your feet. So I'm short footing and pulling straight backwards. After that, we make our way towards toe splaying. These are all up on my YouTube page, by the way. This one's a little bit more difficult because it requires a certain level of feeling and understanding of how to do it. So my foot's relaxed right now. It's more narrow, and then I'm going to splay my toes wider. So for me, I'm literally just thinking about pulling all my toes apart, and that splay creates quite a bit of space. I can do that there, put my foot down, and then move from there. So again, I'm splaying my toes to create more space between them to strengthen them in this new position because my foot has to change shape because we're not used, our foot is not meant to walk on a flat surface all the time. It's meant to walk on different types of surfaces that are uneven, that are different textures. And so your foot should be able to change shape. The more you can splay your toe, the more likely your foot can healthily change shapes. One of the last ones I'm going to show you is called foot doming, which is where we build the muscles inside the foot. And again, this helps develop a strong arch. For those of you that might be saying, I have a high arch, I have a low arch, I have flat feet, the arch is not bones, it's muscle and connective tissue. So even though people will have varying degrees of arches, you can still strengthen your arch. And if you have a flat foot, newsflash, you still have some type of arch. It's just flatter. So unless you have something like a club foot or some type of foot deformity, and let's say a not common anatomical shape, that would be probably one of the only exceptions there. Nonetheless, you can still strengthen your foot. Again, going back to the arch example, if you say I have flat feet, I need an arch support, well, you're taking the little bit of an arch that you have and you're making it weaker by applying pressure from the bottom up rather than stronger applying pressure from the top down. So this foot doming exercise is one of my favorites where I'm pushing my toes through the ground without curling them. And you can see I'm not pulling my big toe back like in the short foot exercise, but I am pushing down. It creates a dome. That's why it's called doming. I'm not rolling my ankle. And as I go through, I push down, I relax. I push down, I relax. And so I'm going to go for a second, right? So pushing down, relaxing, pushing down, relaxing, pushing down, relaxing. And I do longer holds. I'm just demoing here and showing how to not do the curl. But that creates that little bit of a lift, and it will really burn the inside of your foot. Especially I'll have people do it where I'll have them do 10 reps with a 2-second hold on each one. And then on the 10th rep, I'll have them hold it for 1 or 2 minutes. And oh my God, does that foot light on fire. And a lot of times it cramps as well. So just to summarize, again, when we wear shoes that are not natural for our feet, our foot starts to develop problems, our knees get problems, our hips get problems, and our lower back gets problems. And that even dictates how we move things when we're overhead as well, because if my hips aren't set, well, that's the foundation that my upper body might be moving off of. So if you're interested, you can book this pain-free clarity call with me where we're just going to talk about what's going on with you so you can gain a little bit better clarity of perhaps what's going on. You can join the Facebook group. That's the QR code on the left. And if you do have any questions, please let me know.